Hello, this is my final video presentation for Education 4400. I decided to do a video because I really thought I could get my points across a lot better if I could just freely talk about them instead of trying to figure out how to write it out. Plus, I thought it'd be more interesting for you than just reading a paper or scrolling through a PowerPoint. So first is the 5 things that I learned from this course. And the first thing was really what a Socratic seminar was, and also how to fully participate in a Socratic seminar. I'd heard the term before, and I had kind of had an idea of what it was, but I never participated in one. I didn't know the difference between a Socratic seminar and just a regular seminar. So through this course, through participating in the Socratic seminars and through preparing for them, really is how I learned what a Socratic seminar was and what the difference between that and just sitting in a normal seminar. So one of the things that I found that was different from a normal seminar was that if I'm having a discussion in a class, usually I'm thinking about what I'm going to discuss on the spot. I just go off of whatever the professor or whoever's leading the discussion is saying, or what maybe another classmate is saying, and I think of what I want to say on the spot. And I usually like to do this. I like to participate in class discussions. I'm usually just very open to do that. So for this, I wanted to make sure that I was prepared because I knew that the way you had described the Socratic seminars, it needed to be very focused on interpreting the readings that we were given. So I really learned what a Socratic seminar was as I prepared for them. So I did this by reading and making sure I was comprehending what I was reading. I would take notes as I was reading so that I would know and be prepared with what I wanted to discuss when I got to class. And I also helped myself comprehend by really listening to my peers and what they were saying so that I could kind of apply it back to what I had taken from the readings. Each time that we did a Socratic seminar, I did get more confident, and I would go back and read and think, well, I really kind of thought this when we were doing the last Socratic seminar, so maybe now I want to look for it in this reading, and so I can bring that to the discussion. And I also realized that there is still a lot of on-the-spot discussion happening. I still would think of things during the Socratic seminar that I hadn't really prepared for while preparing for the Socratic seminar. And I thought this was important to take with me from this class because when I'm a teacher, I'm going to be needing to read and comprehend a lot of different documents, such as legislature, the changes in legislature, IEPs, and different policies. Depending on what school I'm working in, they might have different policies, and I need to understand those documents so that I can apply them to my teaching. Obviously, I need to understand the goals in an IEP and why a child has an IEP so that I can support that child and teach them. And then the policies, just so I make sure that I'm doing what the school expects of me. And I also, by doing the Socratic seminars, I think now I will be better able to discuss those kinds of documents I'll come across in teaching with other professionals, because it's great if I can comprehend them and use them, but it's also good to be able to discuss them with other professionals. The second thing that I learned was that the Reggio Emilia approach that I studied for Project 1 is really more about materials than curriculum. Now I say that really the materials are what make the curriculum, and I did not realize that when I chose that as a project, chose that to study. So by doing Project 1, I learned a lot more about the Reggio Emilia approach, and I realized how big of an emphasis that materials had. And that is really what Reggio Emilia is all about. Now, when I started Project 1, I thought that I had a pretty good understanding of Reggio Emilia, and that this would just be kind of compiling all the things I already knew so that they'd be readily available for me when I was ready to implement it in a classroom. But by completing Project 1, I learned that there were so many things I did not know and did not understand about the Reggio Emilia approach. I learned, again, how important the materials you choose are, and how to set up the materials, how to set them up so that it's truly Reggio inspired, and how to use the materials properly. I also learned more about ages and what to do for each age, because it's really a little bit different for infants and toddlers. So you have to make sure for the younger infants, you're doing what is best for them while doing what's also best for the toddlers. So you have to differentiate based on age group. So I learned a lot more about that during Project 1 and how I can do that depending on what children I have. Other things that I really learned a lot more about was storage. I was really surprised with how particular they are in the book I was reading, what an emphasis they put on storage and how to utilize it for the teacher and also for the children, making materials accessible for them, but then also the teacher being organized with the way that they use storage. I also learned a lot about why Reggio Emilia is the way it is, their purpose, why they choose to do certain things, use natural materials, and just all the different things that are behind it. I also now know how to find the materials I need and what materials to look for, and I already have compiled resources that I can use. I'm excited to have those readily available. I also use some websites to fill in information, make sure that I was getting exactly what I was looking for, and I also used Pinterest, and that was actually your suggestion that I look, and I did start a board, and I have pins on there I've started gathering so I can use those and explore those more. So I chose the Reggio Emilia as the second thing that I wanted to talk about in this final, because now it will help me set up my classroom. I'm very interested in the Reggio Emilia approach, so I'm really excited that now I'm prepared to start a classroom using aspects from it. I already have resources, and I know that it'll be right since I've done research, and it's not just going to be the ideas that I thought I knew so well. The third thing I learned in this course that I wanted to highlight was self-directed learning. We talk a lot about that in my early childhood classes, but I never realized that there were opportunities for it past kindergarten and really what is considered the early childhood grades. You just hear about how structured classrooms are and how strict they are, but you never really see anyone doing anything about it. You hear that it needs to be changed, we talk about it, but I didn't realize that there were actually other options, that there were actually other people making changes. It was very inspiring how much we talked about it and how passionate you were about it, and to hear that people are actually working on that. And so I really learned about the self-directed learning first from the video you showed, I believed on the first day of class or very early in the semester, about the kids who had kind of formed their own group within a school, and they worked on their own projects just like we worked on projects throughout the semester. And then again, when Hope Wilder came and spoke to us, so that was very inspiring to me to hear how passionate she was about it. That she was actually taking in starting her own school based on ideas that she had when she was working in a school that was all about self-directed learning. So it was just very encouraging to hear her talk about it and to see again that there are people trying to make changes and who are making changes. And listening to her talk about it and seeing the different videos and talking about it a few other times, I think, in class, it was so real. It wasn't just a concept, it really made it real for me. So I chose this as my third thing I wanted to take with me because it makes me want to look into other options. Are there other people doing this? What other options are out there, and who else is really trying to make a change? I also want to try to use it. I want to make sure that I'm giving my students the opportunities to learn what they want to learn and direct their own learning. Even though I think it will be a lot easier for me than maybe some of my classmates, just because there is such a big emphasis for it in early childhood. I also now have the information that we've talked about to tell other educators and just other professionals about it. Since we've talked about it so much, I can kind of use the information that we've talked about and let other people know what's going on. The fourth thing that I chose to talk about is classroom management. I learned about classroom management with my feedback group I was in with Stephanie. She did, I believe, her first and second, maybe even her third project around classroom management, and so it was very interesting to learn more about it through her. I kind of had an idea what classroom management was. I kind of just thought of the different aspects of it. I've never really thought about it holistically as a classroom management plan. And so I kind of had an idea of what it was in early childhood and how I would facilitate it in a preschool or kindergarten classroom. But by doing the feedback group with Stephanie, I learned how it looks in early childhood and past early childhood in the older grades. I think she did a comparison of a kindergarten class and a second grade class, which was very interesting to me, and I really liked how she pulled the components from both classroom management styles to create her own. And so that was really what I took from it. What I learned is that you have to find the balance between a little bit of structure, but also a little bit more laid back. And I think it also depends on the students you have. Your classroom management plan might look a little different from year to year depending on the students you have in your classroom. So her comparison of it was really what I took from that, and it really made me start to think about it and start compiling thoughts and ideas for my own classroom management plan. So I have started forming some ideas about that, such as making the rules as a classroom, letting the children help with that because they're more likely to go along with the rules and comply with the rules if they're the ones who created them. So I learned that the classroom management plan is it's more than just a set of rules that you establish. It's how you set up the environment, the routines, how you implement the routines and the rules, and just the interactions with the students. And I think that it's important to have a classroom management plan, and why I chose it to take with me into my teaching was because I'll need one eventually, and so it was good to start thinking about it and my beliefs in it, and it made me start thinking about it more concretely and start forming those ideas. I think that it's so important to the classroom atmosphere. The way you are implementing and managing the classroom will really determine how the students feel, if they feel secure and safe in the classroom, or if they just feel like it's very institutional. So I also believe that having a good classroom management plan is really going to determine how much learning takes place, what kind of learning, and how beneficial the learning is to the children. The fifth and final thing that I learned in this class that I wanted to highlight in this presentation was really something that I learned about myself during this class. And that is that I'm a lot more creative than I really thought I was. I've never seen myself as a creative person. I usually just kind of follow the guidelines of whatever a project is or whatever it is I need to do. So when we first started this class and you were kind of explaining to us how it was going to work with the projects, I was a little bit concerned just because I knew that I wasn't that creative and I didn't really know how to do a project if I wasn't given the guidelines to do it. So I was excited about having the opportunity to just learn what I wanted to learn and kind of have the freedom to do that. But again, I was concerned that how was I going to think of enough to work on for a 3-week-long project, much less do that 3 times. But by completing the projects, I learned that once I get an idea and kind of get one idea started, it really starts to grow and grow and grow. And I realized that I would start generating ideas faster than I could actually add them into each project. I would find myself writing notes to myself because I would think of something while I was working on something else, and so I wouldn't want to forget it, so I would write it down, make a little note, come back to it later. So I was really surprised with how creative I could be and how I could get ideas to flow and think of new things without having a strict set of guidelines to follow. So I learned this probably first during project 2, just because that was more of me creating my own classroom using the Reggio Emilia ideas. And so I really thought that, again, I would just use the guidelines of Reggio Emilia, lay out a classroom, get the materials, but I kept thinking of more and more things I wanted to incorporate and more things I wanted to research and find. So project 2 was probably where I learned this about myself the most. But then also, again, in project 3, doing the unit on dinosaurs, it was the same thing. I kind of had what I wanted to do a few activities, find some materials for centers, but I just kept thinking of more and more activities to do. And even though I didn't write out the full activities, I did have another list kind of compiled of starts to activities and more materials to add, and I just kept thinking of more and more ideas. So I think that this is an important thing for me to take with me because I'm definitely more confident in my planning now. And I know that I can be creative and I can think of good ideas without having to search the internet and use other people's ideas. I already have starts on a few things that I'm really excited about. All of my projects I will definitely use next year when I start teaching, or at least eventually. And ultimately, I've realized that the children are who is going to benefit from this, because now I know I am creative and I know exactly what I can do. So I'll push myself and I'll use the projects that I've done and a lot of other things I've learned to keep being creative and just keep pushing myself to plan more and more things. So now we are to the 3 things that I learned during my practicum, which I'm actually in my senior 1 internship. So these are the 3 things I've learned in my internship this semester. The first thing is working with real IEPs. I really learned this while I was writing my task 1, because in the Birth Through Kindergarten program, we write our task 1 during our senior 1 internship. So I needed the IEPs, I got them and I read through them, and I really learned how to apply them and plan for them. I've worked with sample IEPs in my courses. We've read them and kind of looked through them, but I've never seen a real one that I could actually attach to a child. So it was different because I know the child and I know their behaviors and I have experience with the actual child, and so the IEP made a lot more sense to me. I also really liked having an IEP with a child I knew, because when you read an IEP in a class and you're using it for an assignment, the only information you have about the child is just what you have in the IEP, which is really just what they need support with. So I really liked being able to read an IEP as just a part of a child and knowing that they are so much more than just what's written in the IEP. So this is what I am taking with me from my internship, because IEPs are such an important part of children's education and their learning. I'm always going to have children with IEPs, so I really need to know how to use them and how to plan supports for children to reach their goals so that they can learn just like any typically developing child. The second thing I am taking from my senior one internship this semester is how to collaborate with other teachers in other classes. So I learned this every day I was in my internship. My preschool class, I'm in a NC pre-K class, we do a lot with the other preschool class at my school. We do recess with them, we do some large group activities together, lots of different things. And so I've learned how beneficial that can be to both classes, because the children get to interact with children who they aren't with every minute of the day, and the teachers can share ideas and share materials, and the children really just get a more rounded experience when they get to interact with other classes and not just stay in their little bubble. My class also shares a bathroom with a kindergarten class, and so I've learned a lot about working with that teacher to make sure that we both can share the bathroom and our kids can both use it when we need it, and kind of letting each other know when there's a problem with the bathroom. So just collaborating and making sure that we're working together on that. This is an important thing that I'll take with me, because now I have an understanding and a better idea of how to collaborate. I've actually had experience with it, and I've observed my clinical teacher and teacher assistant doing it. They have such good relationships with a lot of the teachers they work with, and I see how that benefits the children. And it's also important because I need to be able to reach out and feel comfortable reaching out to other teachers and other professionals so that my children in my class can benefit from it. And also, something else is I need to be able to facilitate the interactions with children when they're not seeing these children all the time. They're not used to them. They need to learn how to interact with children who might be a little different from them. And so that's something else that I've learned, is how to help with those interactions and facilitate them a little bit better. The third thing that I will take with me from my internship senior one is how to use a smartboard. They are a very prominent part of classrooms now, and I am not very tech savvy. I do not go out of my way to learn about technology and really use it, and so that is something that I have gotten a lot more exposure to in my internship, just because of how much my teachers use the smartboard. So I learned how to use a smartboard. There was one specific day where my clinical teacher showed me how to lock an image to an icon and then add a word and tie it all together and add sound and movement to it when a child comes and clicks on it. And just different things that you can do with it, and then she just turned it over to me and said, if you'll just do the rest of them, then that will be great. So I got a lot of practice with it. I'm continuing to get practice with it. A lot of times I'll help them do things. I'm still watching them. I try to observe how they do it and what they're adding. And so they're continuing to help me, and they will talk about what they're doing while they're doing it so that I can really see what they're doing. And it's important for me to know how to use a smartboard because, like I said, they're pretty much in all classrooms now. They're a very prominent feature, and they add a whole nother element to learning. The students love to interact with them. It can make things more real for them, and so I think that they can be a very beneficial part of a classroom. There's also the 21st century skills standards that I've learned about in some of my other classes. One of those is technology literacy, and that's something that children are going to need to learn eventually because it's such a big part of our society. So the smartboard is a great resource for that because the teacher can kind of set it up and make sure it's all appropriate and it's filled with things the children can learn from, but it's also helping the children learn different ways to use technology. So now we come to my 2 goals that I have for myself as I go into my Senior 2 internship next semester. The first thing that I really am going to strive to learn more about is assessment. I have never really taken an interest in assessment, and I don't know that much about it, but I know that it's very important to teaching into a classroom. So I really want to know about the different kinds, all the different kinds of assessments, and what they can be used for, how to use them, and how to apply them both to supporting the children in my classroom and also to my planning. And I chose this as one of my goals because it's just such a huge part of being a teacher. You need to do assessments, it's required to do assessments, and so I think it's important that you're doing them right, that you're doing them to benefit your students, not just to check it off the list of things to do. So assessments are used because you need to be able to see where the children are and how you can support them. So I need to be better at assessment so that my children can benefit from it. So I've already started practicing assessment in task 1. So I've practiced it in my EdTPA, kind of forming my assessments and what I'm going to do to assess in my EdTPA. I also plan on researching other practice assessments I can use because I believe I really need to practice it outside of my classroom so that when I'm in my classroom, I can be doing it the best I can. So I plan to research different ways that I can practice assessing. I also want to talk with my clinical teacher about it, how she uses assessments, some methods that she uses, and also just observe her and see just from observations kind of what I can pick up along with discussing it with her. My second goal is to focus more on teaching skills and not just content. Also with the EdTPA, I've realized that a lot of the times when I'm planning activities and different things, I focus on content like leaves, bugs, snow. You just pick whatever the children are interested in and then you teach them more about it, which is great. But I've learned while writing my task 1 that you also need to focus on skills. There's math skills, science skills, the literacy skills, and I don't think I've ever really thought about intentionally teaching a skill or embedding it in the content that I'm teaching. So I think that this is important because early childhood is what sets the foundation for the rest of children's education. So if they're only learning about things like transportation or weather, but they're not learning how to apply that content, then as they keep going up in higher grades, it'll be harder for them to learn how to apply that content. So that's the main reason I want to make sure that I'm intentionally teaching skills. And that was one of the big things that I wanted to focus on, was doing it intentionally, because I might coincidentally teach some skills while I'm teaching content, but I really, for myself, want to be more intentional about it so that I'm making sure the children are learning the skills that are important to their education. So one way I want to do this is by pairing skills with content, which I know is kind of what we're supposed to be doing anyways, especially in the Ed TPA. That's what it's all about, picking a skill and then teaching that skill through interdisciplinary content. So I want to practice this by, in my internship, when I start Senior 2 in January, I'm going to start assessing, going back to my first goal, I'm going to start assessing what skills my children need to work on, and then pairing it with their interests. So I actually want to come up with a chart where I have content and skills. So the content will be their interest. I'll keep track of what they're interested in, what they talk about, what they like to play, and then I'll also assess what skills they still need help with, what skills they need to develop, and I'll start matching those and kind of planning out activities that have the content and the skill to make sure I'm intentionally incorporating those skills into the content I'm teaching. So that is my final reflection on this semester in Education 4400. Thank you, Dr. Curry Knight, for giving me the opportunity to really take ownership of my learning and tailoring it to my interests and what I think I need to work on to be a better teacher. It'll benefit me as I go into my internship and later be teaching in my own classroom, and ultimately it will benefit my future students. So thank you.